For years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were seen as one of Hollywood's most perfect couples. The glamorous actress and the charming country singer who, from the outside, looked like they had it all. No cracks, no drama, just vibes. Their story kicked off in 2005 when they met at an event in Los Angeles. Sparks flew fast. Within months, Keith was sending her love poems, surprise gifts, and heartfelt songs, the kind that make you believe in fairy tales again. It was a full-on whirlwind romance, and by 2006, they were married. The wedding took place in Sydney, Australia, surrounded by family, friends, and flashing cameras everywhere. To the outside world, they were the literal definition of love and success. Nicole often called Keith her rock, while Keith described her as his reason to stay grounded. Together, they built a life packed with red carpet moments, private getaways, and emotional award speeches that made fans melt. But behind the scenes, things weren't as picture-perfect as they seemed. People who worked closely with them started noticing tension. Nicole's career was booming, taking her across continents for movie shoots and premieres, non-stop. Keith, on the other hand, was always on the road, late nights, concerts, touring, and the constant pressure of fame. Slowly but surely, distance crept in. At first, it was small stuff, missed phone calls, clashing schedules, unspoken frustration hanging in the air. But soon, that emotional gap became impossible to ignore. Whispers started circulating in the entertainment industry. Keith was allegedly struggling again with old habits, the same ones that nearly wrecked his career before he met Nicole. Tabloids went wild, speculating about rehab visits, secret arguments, and tearful confrontations behind closed doors. Still, Nicole stayed quiet. Always professional. Always composed. She told interviewers, "Marriage is about patience and love." But her eyes told a different story, pure exhaustion, maybe even heartbreak. By 2023, their already rare public appearances together became almost non-existent. Fans noticed they stopped holding hands on red carpets. Nicole showed up to several major events alone, while Keith dodged interviews that mentioned his wife. By mid-2024, reports of their separation started surfacing, followed by confirmation that the couple had officially divorced. The statement released to the press was polite, almost cold. "After many years of marriage, we have decided to part ways with mutual respect." But what came next caught everyone off guard. Nicole, known for her grace and privacy, finally decided to speak her truth, and she didn't sugarcoat it. In an emotional sit-down interview, she let it all out. Without naming Keith directly, she revealed that her marriage had been built on half-truths, and that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Her words were raw, heavy, and powerful, like a quiet storm of pain and honesty. "So many times," she said, "you fight for something long after it's already gone. I believed love could heal anything, but it can't fix what's not willing to be honest." The interview went viral overnight. Fans around the world reacted with shock and sympathy. Many felt Nicole had spent years protecting Keith's image while silently dealing with betrayal and disappointment. Others believed there was more to the story, that both were victims of fame, pressure, and unrealistic expectations. Still, one thing was clear: Nicole Kidman was done hiding. She pulled back the curtain on the pain behind the perfection and completely changed how people saw their fairy tale marriage. After the interview dropped, social media went crazy. Fans couldn't stop talking about Nicole Kidman's calm but razor-sharp words. Entertainment outlets broke down every sentence, every pause, every facial expression. People started asking the big question: what did Keith Urban do that made Nicole finally break her silence after nearly 2 decades of defending him? Within days, tabloids dug up details that painted a heartbreaking picture. Insiders claimed Keith had been battling personal demons for years: old addictions, emotional instability, and an obsession with keeping a perfect public image. One anonymous source close to the couple told People magazine, Nicole spent years trying to save him. She was patient, loving, and forgiving. But eventually, she realized she was saving someone who didn't want to be saved. The truth, according to insiders, was that Keith Urban had built a double life. One side was all glamour, concerts, and fame. The other was loneliness, guilt, and secrets. He poured those emotions into his music, songs fans thought were about love, but Nicole later revealed many of those lyrics were born from guilt and regret. In one of her most emotional moments, Nicole admitted, "When you love someone who's at war with themselves, you end up becoming collateral damage. I stopped recognizing the person I married." Those words hit millions right in the chest. This wasn't just celebrity drama anymore. It was about a woman finally freeing herself from years of silent suffering. She confessed that her biggest mistake wasn't trusting Keith, but losing herself while trying to fix him. Behind the cameras, Nicole endured lonely nights, constantly worrying if Keith would come home sober or if another headline would explode the next morning. Despite her fame and beauty, she lived in emotional isolation. The same woman who held audiences spellbound on screen was privately holding back tears at home. Their closest friends saw the collapse coming long before the world did. "He adored her," one friend said, "but he couldn't handle being Mr. Kidman. He wanted to prove he was more than just Nicole's husband." That pressure slowly consumed him. After the divorce, Keith tried to control the narrative. He avoided interviews and poured everything into music, releasing songs filled with sorrow and regret. Fans instantly felt that every lyric was aimed at Nicole. In one song, he wrote, "I broke the wings of the only angel who believed I could fly." It shattered hearts, but for many, it came way too late. Meanwhile, Nicole looked reborn. For the first time in years, she seemed genuinely at peace. She focused on her children, her career, and herself. Her next film premiere stunned everyone. Dressed in a white gown, smiling with quiet strength, she looked radiant. Not because she had moved on, but because she had reclaimed who she was. In a later interview, when asked if she still loved Keith, she paused. "Love doesn't just vanish," she said softly. "But sometimes you have to love someone from a distance for your own survival." The world applauded her honesty. Nicole Kidman wasn't just an Oscar-winning actress anymore. She became a symbol of grace after heartbreak, proof that strength doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means knowing when to walk away. Keith Urban, on the other hand, struggled with the aftermath. Sources said he checked into therapy and focused on recovery. He never publicly responded to Nicole's statements, but his silence said everything. The once charming musician who filled stadiums was now facing the quiet consequences of his actions. In many ways, both were victims of their own success, two stars trapped in the gravity of fame and expectation. Hollywood sold their love as a fairy tale, but real life turned it into a tragedy wrapped in headlines. Even years later, fans still debate who was to blame. Was Keith destroyed by fame and inner conflict? Or was Nicole too guarded, too distant? But those who followed their journey know one truth. Nicole gave everything. She stood by Keith when no one else did, supported him through rehab, defended him against gossip, and held the family together as long as she could. When she finally walked away, it wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. In her final words during that viral interview, Nicole summed it all up. "You can't heal someone who refuses to face their own truth. Exposing the truth isn't revenge, it's freedom." That line echoed everywhere. TikTok, magazine covers, millions of hearts. Nicole Kidman didn't just expose Keith Urban. She exposed the painful truth about love, sacrifice, and the cost of keeping secrets in a world obsessed with perfection. And when the lights faded, one thing was obvious. She wasn't broken. She was finally free. When Nicole Kidman spoke, the world listened. But Keith Urban's silence spoke even louder. After years of being the smiling country superstar, the guy who could light up a stage with one grin, Keith vanished from the spotlight. No talk shows. No red carpets. Just silence. Insiders said he split his time between Los Angeles and Nashville, trying to rebuild away from the cameras. For the first time in decades, the noise was gone, and so were the lies that held his world together. People close to him said he hit emotional rock bottom. He thought he could balance fame, music, and love, one friend said. He lost all three at once. Nicole was his anchor. Without her, he drifted. His nights were lonely and sleepless. He sat in his studio until dawn, strumming unfinished songs, whispering apologies into the mic. He wasn't chasing charts anymore. He was just trying to survive. In one unreleased track that leaked online, his lyrics cut deep. "You can fake a smile for the crowd, but you can't lie to the mirror. I built a kingdom on promises and watched it crumble clearer." Fans heard it like a confession. For the first time, Keith Urban wasn't performing. He was begging. Over time, he started showing real reflection. Therapy. reconnecting with old friends. But Nicole never looked back. Her decision was final, rooted in self-respect, not hate. When asked if she forgave him, she smiled softly and said, "Forgiveness isn't a gift for others. It's a release for yourself." Keith's attempts to rebuild his image got mixed reactions. Fans still loved him, but the media stayed brutal. Every song, every photo, every move was dissected. Then he released The Woman I Lost, just an acoustic guitar and a shaking voice. It hit hard because it was real. She gave me light when I lived in shadows. But love's not endless if the truth is hollow, and I broke her heart with my own hands. Fans flooded social media. Some called it his apology. Others said it was way too late. Keith didn't defend himself. He owned it. "I was selfish," he admitted quietly at a charity event. "I loved her, but I didn't know how to love myself back then." Sponsors left. Sales dipped. The charm faded. But he didn't care anymore. He played small shows, no lights, no hype, just him and his guitar. When someone shouted, "We still love you, Keith," he replied, "Then learn from me. Don't wait until it's gone to be grateful." Silence filled the room. For the first time in years, Keith Urban wasn't a superstar. He was human, flawed, regretful, and trying to make peace with his past. Nicole, meanwhile, was thriving. She jumped into new film projects, backed humanitarian causes, and stayed locked in on empowering women through straight-up, honest storytelling. "If my experience can help even one woman walk away from a toxic relationship, then it was worth it," she said in an interview. Through it all, Nicole never dragged Keith's name again. Her silence wasn't bitterness. It was closure. She told the truth, and that truth set her free. Years later, when asked if she'd ever work with Keith again in any way, Nicole smiled softly and replied, "Life is unpredictable. But some doors, once closed, are meant to stay that way." Their story, once a fairy tale, turned into a lesson, a reminder that even the brightest love can fade when honesty is gone, and that healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means walking in opposite directions with dignity. Keith Urban's downfall wasn't loud or messy. It was quiet. The sound of a man realizing too late that fame and love don't survive without truth. Nicole Kidman's revelation wasn't revenge. It was liberation. And as both continued down separate paths, the world watched in silence, not with judgment, but reflection. Because behind the glitter, every love story carries a shadow. And in theirs, that shadow told the truth the world refused to see for way too long. Years passed. The media slowly drifted to newer scandals, fresher headlines. But for Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, the echoes never fully disappeared. Both had walked through fire, and both, in very different ways, came out changed. Keith's road to redemption started low-key. No more stadium tours or flashy award nights. Instead, he played small local venues across America. The lights were dimmer, the crowds tighter, but the vibe was real. Fans said he didn't sing at people anymore. He sang to them. His voice carried weight now. His lyrics were soaked in humility and truth. One night in Nashville, Keith shared a moment that wrecked the room. Before playing one of his new songs, he told the crowd, "This isn't a song about regret. It's about realizing that sometimes you destroy something beautiful because you don't yet know how to love it." That was the rawest thing he'd ever said on stage. The song Grace and Goodbye became a major turning point. Critics called it the most vulnerable track of his life. No shiny hooks, no polished gloss, just pure emotion, a confession wrapped in melody. Meanwhile, Nicole Kidman stepped into what many called the most powerful era of her life. She wasn't trying to prove a damn thing anymore. Not to Hollywood, not to anyone. She embraced her age, her scars, her truth. Her performances hit deeper. Her interviews felt grounded. In a world obsessed with youth and perfection, Nicole was redefining strength. In a Vanity Fair interview, she dropped a line that went viral instantly. "Healing doesn't mean pretending it never hurt. It means choosing to grow from the pain." That quote flooded social media, inspiring people dealing with their own heartbreak. Nicole had flipped her tragedy into empowerment, something bigger than fame. Off camera, she focused on her kids, her art, and her humanitarian work. She backed organizations helping women recover from emotional abuse and addiction, causes that hit close to home. "No one should ever feel like they have to save someone to be worthy of love," she said. Funny enough, Keith was on a similar wave. Away from the spotlight, He started mentoring young musicians struggling with addiction and fame. I tell them what no one told me, he admitted on a podcast. Success means nothing if you lose your soul chasing it. For a while, people wondered if their paths would ever cross again. Hollywood loves full-circle moments. But when they finally met years later at a charity gala in Los Angeles, it wasn't dramatic. It was calm. Witnesses said Nicole walked up first, smiled gently, shook his hand, and said, "It's good to see you doing well." Keith, clearly emotional, nodded. "Thank you," he said quietly. No cameras. No reporters. Just two people at peace with the past. After that, tabloids lost their minds. Are Nicole and Keith reuniting? Old flames back on. But the truth was simpler and way more beautiful. Forgiveness had replaced bitterness. Keith later said, "Sometimes closure doesn't come from words. It comes when you realize the person you hurt has forgiven you, and you've finally forgiven yourself." Fans felt that deep. Keith Urban, once haunted by fame and failure, was finally learning what peace really meant. Nicole found hers too. Asked about Keith in a Hai Kong Hai Lum interview, she didn't talk about betrayal. She said, "He was a chapter in my story, a painful one, but necessary. Without it, I wouldn't be who I am today." Her calm said everything. She'd moved on, not angry, but grateful for the lesson. Their story became a mirror for people everywhere, about love, imperfection, and redemption. Two souls who once broke each other, now walking separate paths with mutual respect. Fans say their love story didn't end. It evolved. It became deeper than romance, proof of human resilience. Keith's later albums turned inward. Songs about honesty, vulnerability, growth. "I stopped chasing hits," he told Rolling Stone. "Now I just write what's true." Nicole used her platform to encourage women to speak their truth without fear. She often repeated the line that guided her healing. "You don't have to burn in someone else's chaos to prove loyalty." She had turned pain into power. Years after the split, when asked what she'd say to her younger self, Nicole smiled. "You did your best. Now let go." That one sentence said it all. The love, the loss, the lessons. In the end, after divorce, Nicole Kidman exposing Keith Urban wasn't about revenge or blame. It was about truth. About a woman refusing to live in someone else's shadow, and a man learning redemption starts when denial ends. Their paths may never merge again, but both finally found what they were chasing: peace, purpose, freedom. And when the cameras faded, one thing stayed timeless. Sometimes the bravest move is telling the truth and walking away. By the time the noise around the divorce died down, Nicole Kidman had quietly become bigger than any headline. She wasn't defined by the men she loved, Tom Cruise, Keith Urban, or anyone else. She was her own story: survival, transformation, grace. Hollywood admired her talent, but now it respected her courage. Producers offered her roles she once only dreamed of: complex, broken but brilliant women who mirrored her rebirth. When she starred in The Silent Fall, about a woman rebuilding after betrayal, audiences cried because it felt real. Art copying life, and life teaching art how to feel. In interviews, Nicole didn't dodge the past anymore. She faced it head-on, calm and steady. "You can't rewrite pain," she told The Guardian. "You can only learn the language it was written in." That line became a mantra, shared daily, quoted everywhere. She launched a foundation focused on mental health and women's recovery, funding counseling centers in Australia and the US. Each entrance carried one message: truth heals. Behind the scenes, her life slowed down. Filming, parenting, peace. She gardened, painted, sat in silence without grabbing her phone. Friends said she laughed more. And when she cried, it was from gratitude, not grief. Keith kept his comeback humble, stayed sober, toured selectively, wrote music full of humility. In 2027, he dropped Second Chance Sky, praised as a confession aimed at heaven. One track, For Her Peace, opened with, "If love is a lesson, she was my school." Asked if it was about Nicole, Keith smiled. "Every song is, in some way. But she doesn't need to hear it. The world already did." Nicole, asked about the album, responded with warmth. "I'm proud he found his light. That's all I ever wanted for him. No drama. Just two grown souls choosing compassion over chaos." By 2028, Nicole became the face of reinvention. Another Oscar, not just for acting, but presence. During her speech, she said, To anyone told they're too broken to begin again, look at me. You can always start over. The room erupted, not with hype, but respect. Keith watched from Nashville, standing still, tears falling. She did it, he whispered. Later, he posted, "Proud of you, Nick. Always." Millions liked it, but what mattered was the kindness that closed their story. They thrived separately. Keith mentoring artists. Nicole producing raw, honest films about womanhood. When their paths crossed, it was smiles, not scars. And maybe that's how real love ends. Not in flames, but forgiveness. By 2030, Nicole Kidman's legacy went beyond awards. Universities taught her evolution. Activists quoted her speeches. She became proof that vulnerability and power can coexist. In a rare 2031 interview, asked what happiness meant, she answered, "Peace. Not the absence of noise, the presence of self." Asked if she regretted her marriage, Nicole smiled that familiar, knowing smile. "No regrets," she said. "I learned to love better, and to love myself most." The camera lingered, and in that silence, the world saw it all: heartbreak, healing, triumph. Her story, once gossip, had become a timeless lesson in strength. And as the lights dimmed, one truth hit hard and clear. Even after the most painful goodbye, there's always a way to rise again. By the early 2030s, the world wasn't talking about Nicole Kidman in the language of scandal or survival anymore. Her name had turned into shorthand for grace, for that quiet kind of power that shows up after devastation. She had flipped every bruise into wisdom, every heartbreak into art. Hollywood's younger generation didn't look at her like some untouchable icon. They saw a mentor, and she owned that role, no hesitation. When 20-something actresses came to her looking for advice, she'd smile and say, "Don't chase applause, chase truth. Applause fades. Truth echoes." That line blew up. It became a tattoo, a slogan, a North Star for women in an industry that way too often confused noise with value. Nicole had started producing stories bold enough to show imperfection, aging, loss, forgiveness. Her studio's motto was simple: human first, celebrity never. She made sure every project hired more women behind the camera, demanded more authenticity in front of it, and she straight up refused to let pain be romanticized. Instead, she showed audiences that healing isn't linear. It's messy, it's brave, and yeah, it's sacred. Away from the spotlight, her life slowed down and softened. She spent long stretches in Australia, walking barefoot through red soil, watching the sun melt into the water. Sometimes she'd post a single photo. No caption, no filters. And somehow millions of people would feel calmer just looking at it. Peace became her brand without her ever trying. When a journalist asked what she'd learned from her two very public marriages, Nicole answered like someone who'd already forgiven the world. Love isn't about rescue. It's about respect. And sometimes the biggest act of love is letting go. Keith Urban, now sober, grounded, and a humble elder statesman of country music, echoed her words in interviews. He admitted his lowest moment became his greatest teacher. "Pain gave me perspective," he said during a televised tribute. "I lost the best thing in my life, and that's how I learned how to live." They never remarried. They didn't need to. Their lives found different rhythms. Hers cinematic, his musical, but the same melody of understanding still connected them. When Keith dropped his acoustic record, Echoes of Peace, Nicole sent him a handwritten note that just said, "Beautiful. Keep healing." He framed it in his studio. By 2033, Nicole's foundation had built 10 Truth Heals centers around the world, offering free therapy to women and children affected by emotional trauma. Every opening started with a short film she narrated herself. "We are not what broke us. We are what we build from the pieces." People cried every time. She had turned personal pain into public purpose, the rarest kind of artistry. In 2034, she received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Cannes Film Festival. The crowd stood for 7 full minutes as she walked on stage. Instead of talking about movies, she talked about humanity. "The spotlight used to scare me," she said. "I thought it exposed flaws. Now I know it just shows what's real. So here I am. Real, imperfect, grateful." When she finished, the applause wasn't loud or wild. It was reverent. People weren't clapping for fame. They were clapping for truth. That night, a journalist asked if she had a message for Keith Urban. She laughed softly. "Tell him the songs got better." It wasn't sarcasm. It was affection that had outgrown possession. Years later, long after awards and records faded, Nicole Kidman's story became required reading in university courses on media ethics and celebrity culture. Professors called her life a case study in authenticity. Psychologists quoted her interviews and lectures about self-worth. Her films were screened not for box office numbers, but for emotional honesty. In the final chapter of her memoir, The Light After the Storm, she wrote, "I once believed survival meant silence. Now I know it means speaking. If my voice trembles, it's only because I'm still alive." That single line sold 1 million copies. But the real success couldn't be measured. Thousands of letters poured in from readers saying her story saved them. When she turned 70, Nicole celebrated quietly with family and close friends in Sydney. Keith sent flowers with a short note. "Thank you for teaching me what real love is, truth." She smiled reading it. Time had done what anger never could. It healed. As the sun set that evening, someone asked what she hoped people would remember about her legacy. Nicole looked out at the ocean and said, "That I loved deeply, fell hard, and still chose kindness." And that was it. The final act of a life written not in scripts, but in courage. Because after the divorce, after the headlines, after every whispered rumor and broken promise, Nicole Kidman didn't just expose Keith Urban. She exposed the illusion that heartbreak destroys us. It doesn't. It remakes us. Through her journey, the world learned a quiet, unshakable truth. The end of love is never the end of life. It's the beginning of becoming who you were meant to be. The story of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban no longer lived in headlines. It breathed in lessons. Their journey, once torn apart by tabloids and magnified by gossip, softened into something timeless. A story of two souls who broke, learned, and rose again. When time does its quiet work, pain turns into memory, and memory turns into meaning. That's exactly what happened here. Years after the final curtain fell, both Nicole and Keith found what they were really searching for. Not fame, not public redemption, but peace inside themselves. Nicole Kidman, standing under the Australian sky at 71, often said her favorite sound was silence. "It's the sound of peace," she told a journalist. "For years I mistook noise for love. Now I know love doesn't shout, it whispers." Her words carried the weight of a life fully lived. She had walked through heartbreak, loss, and loneliness, and still came out with an open heart. She didn't let bitterness harden her. She let compassion become her legacy. Keith Urban found his stillness too. Living in Nashville, mentoring young artists about truth, art, and the real cost of fame. He rarely spoke about Nicole in interviews, not because he was avoiding her, but out of respect. When asked once what he'd say to her if they met again, he paused, smiled, and said, "Thank you for everything. For loving me when I didn't love myself, and for letting me go when I needed to learn how." That line became legendary. It wasn't polished. It was real. In 2036, at a charity concert benefiting Nicole's Truth Heals Foundation, Keith performed one last song, a stripped-down acoustic ballad called For the Last Time. The lyrics were about closure, peace, and gratitude. When he finished, he looked up at the sky, whispered, "Thank you, Nick," and walked off stage into thunderous silence. Not pity, respect. Nicole, watching from home, smiled through tears. She didn't need to call him. The song said everything words couldn't. Their story, once rooted in tragedy, turned into poetry, not about lovers reuniting, but about souls redeemed. It wasn't a Hollywood ending. It was better. It was human. As the years passed, Nicole became a quiet legend. People said there was light in her eyes, not the fragile glow of youth, but the steady shine of someone who'd faced darkness and learned to hold it gently. When asked in her final interview what she hoped people would learn from her life, she said softly that love is never wasted, even when it ends. Every heartbreak shapes you into who you're meant to be. Forgive, not because they deserve peace, but because you do. She smiled that same warm, unguarded smile that once captivated the world. Keith Urban's final public words about her came years later in a tribute video. "She taught me that truth is the only song worth singing." And maybe that was their real duet. Not melody, but meaning. In the end, their story wasn't about divorce or fame. It was about forgiveness, the rare, beautiful kind that frees both sides. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban proved that even under the spotlight, even under heartbreak, grace is possible. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering differently. Because when love ends, the story doesn't die. It transforms into wisdom, compassion, and legacy. And somewhere between the chords of Keith's last song and the quiet strength of Nicole's final smile, the world learned one simple truth. The greatest love story isn't about two people who stay together. It's about two souls who forgive each other and keep shining anyway.